The International Monetary Fund, the world's top economic watchdog, has just dropped its latest forecast for 2026. So, what do they see coming for your wallet and the global economy? We're going to break down their official predictions in the next 3 minutes. This isn't just some dense report full of charts you'd need a PhD to understand. Think of it as the IMF's roadmap for the next year, giving us a peek into the forces that will shape your financial life and the wider economy. The report paints a picture of a world economy walking a tightrope, a situation the fund describes with phrases like tenuous resilience. The stakes are high. We're talking about global growth, the fight against inflation, and the shadow of trade disputes that could scramble supply chains and hike prices. Understanding this is key because what happens on the global stage has a direct line to your local job market and the cost of everything from gas to groceries. So let's get into it. First up, the headline number. The IMF is projecting the global economy will grow by a modest 3.1% in 2026. To put that in perspective, it's steady, but it's still below the historical average we saw before the pandemic. It signals that the world is still grappling with some serious headwinds. But the story isn't the same everywhere. There's a clear split between the world's major economies. For advanced economies like the United States, Europe, and Japan, growth is expected to be much slower, clocking in around 1.5% to 1.6%. These nations are dealing with the after-effects of higher interest rates, disruptions in the labor market, and tight government budgets. On the flip side, emerging markets and developing economies are the real engines of global growth, projected to expand at a much healthier rate of just over 4%. This is thanks to stronger demand at home and younger populations. So why isn't growth stronger? The IMF points to a mixed bag of factors. On one hand, the economy has been surprisingly tough, held up by a few key things. Some governments have been spending to stimulate their economies, and financial conditions have been better than expected. The IMF also highlights a fascinating effect called front-loading. This is where companies, bracing for new tariffs, rush to import goods before the taxes hit, essentially pulling economic activity into the present. It's like a store announcing a price hike for next month, causing a buying frenzy today. That, plus a number of tariff exemptions, meant the initial shock from trade disputes was less painful than first feared. But those good vibes are being canceled out by some stubborn negatives. The main drag continues to be what the IMF calls elevated trade policy uncertainty. When businesses have no idea what trade rules will be from one month to the next, they hit pause on investing and hiring. That uncertainty, along with geopolitical tensions, is putting the brakes on the world's economic potential. Now for the second big piece of the forecast, inflation. And for most of the world, the news is pretty good. After that wild surge in prices post-pandemic, global inflation is set to continue its journey back down to earth. The IMF projects it will fall to about 3.7% in 2026. That's a huge improvement and a sign that the aggressive interest rate hikes from central banks have been doing their job. The main reasons for this cooling are supply chain issues getting sorted out and the bite of that restrictive monetary policy. The prices of energy and goods, which were major culprits, have calmed down significantly. This is especially true in advanced economies, which are on track to get back to their 2% inflation targets sooner than many emerging markets. For the Eurozone, there's even a chance inflation could dip below its 2% target. But the path down isn't a perfectly smooth slide. Inflation for services, things like rent, healthcare, and restaurants, is proving to be stickier and a real challenge in many countries. And the IMF gives a clear warning: this good news on inflation isn't a sure thing. A major conflict escalation, for example, could send energy and shipping costs soaring again, reigniting price pressures. This leaves central bankers in a tricky spot, trying to kill inflation without killing the economy. The story here is a gradual win against rising prices, but with some serious risks still hiding in the wings. If you're getting value from this breakdown of the global economy, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. We put out regular analyses just like this to help you connect the dots between big economic reports and your own financial life. Your support helps us keep making sense of these complex topics. Okay, let's bring it all home to the United States. The IMF's outlook for the US is really a tale of two different stories. First, growth is slowing down. The forecast sees the U.S. economy cooling to about 2.1% growth in 2026. That's a noticeable downshift from the faster pace of recent years and shows that higher interest rates and policy uncertainty are starting to bite. It's not a recession, but it's a clear sign the economy is tapping the brakes. But the real headline for the U.S. is on the other side of the equation: inflation. In a direct contrast to the global trend, the IMF flags that U.S. inflation is expected to stay stubbornly above the Federal Reserve's 2% target well into 2026. This is a huge deal. Even with recent data showing some cooling, the underlying pressures are still there. So what's keeping U.S. prices so high? Analysts point to a few things. The pass-through effects from tariffs are making imported goods more expensive. A strong job market, while great for workers, can also fuel wage growth that pushes businesses to raise prices. And finally, American consumers, backed by jobs and stimulus, have just kept on spending. This sticky inflation hits you directly in the wallet. It means even as the economy slows, your cost of living could keep rising faster than the Fed wants. It also puts the Fed in a bind. The hope is that the central bank will be able to cut interest rates in 2026 to help the slowing economy, but persistent inflation might tie their hands, limiting how much or how fast they can act. This is the central challenge for the U.S. economy, and it's the story to watch in the year ahead. Looming over this entire forecast is the massive, unpredictable issue of trade policy. The IMF points to rising protectionism as a key shock shaping the outlook. While the report notes that the damage from tariffs has been smaller than first feared, that's largely because of that front-loading of imports we talked about and various exemptions that softened the blow. But the danger hasn't passed. The IMF explicitly warns that another major flare-up in trade disputes is a primary risk to the global economy. Their models have a stark warning. A significant tariff hike, and the supply chain chaos that follows could slash about 0.3 percentage points off global GDP. When growth is already just modest, a shock like that would be a huge blow, potentially tipping weaker economies into recession. The IMF has warned that if the latest announced tariff measures stick around, the economic pain for both the US and China would get worse in 2026 and beyond. Beyond trade, the IMF sees other risks. High government debt in major economies is a big concern. Squeezed budgets, combined with new spending needs for things like defense and climate change, raise the risk of a sudden crisis of market confidence. Geopolitical tensions and the chance of a sudden tightening in financial markets are also high on the IMF's worry list. Faced with these risks, the IMF's advice is clear. Policymakers need to get back to predictable trade rules, arguing that stable agreements could give the world economy a real boost. They're also calling on governments to rebuild their financial safety nets, protect their central bank's independence in fighting inflation, and push for reforms to boost productivity. The message is that while the future is risky, the right policy choices can still make a huge difference. So, to wrap up the IMF's 2026 forecast, we're looking at moderate global growth and a general cool-down of inflation. The world economy is set to grow at a modest 3.1%, but that number hides a big split between the slow-moving advanced nations and the faster-growing emerging markets. For the United States, the picture is more complicated. Growth is slowing, but inflation is expected to stay annoyingly high, creating a tough spot for both the Fed and for consumers. And the biggest wildcard of all remains the threat of more trade tariffs. which the IMF sees as a key risk that could seriously derail the global economy. Ultimately, the IMF's forecast is a call for careful navigation. The global economy has proven it's resilient, but the path ahead is narrow and full of potential tripwires. The decisions made in the coming months on trade, spending, and interest rates will be what determines if we get a soft landing or hit more turbulence. Thanks for watching. If you want to stay ahead of the economic trends shaping our world, make sure you're subscribed and check out our other video on how AI is impacting productivity growth.